Welcome to Frontrunners Innovate, where we connect you to global leaders meeting the world's challenges through business and innovation. Well, our guest for this episode is Chuck Moyer. He's president of Task4Pros, a tech-based flexible staffing solution that exceeds industry standards with advantages you probably only dreamed about. Co-hosting with me today is our frontrunner, Mr. Marc Freedman. He's managing partner and co-founder of Evolved Profits, an expense reduction company that looks for ways for companies to save cash without reducing services and put more money in the budget. Very important. Both gentlemen are involved in unique ways to help us improve our businesses. I'm your host, Mary Kurek, CEO of Frontrunners Development, a global business development company that connects businesses to change the world. So let's get you connected right now to Marc and Chuck. So everyone, thank you for being with us for another episode of Frontrunners Innovate. And I have two innovators right here with us today. Neither one of them are in the same town, but they are in the same country, which is good. Both of them in the United States. So we have our special guest today is Chuck Moyer, and he's with Task4Pros and out of the Tennessee area, I believe. And Marc Freedman is my co-host today, and he is with Evolved Profits. Marc has been interviewed by us before, and I was so taken by the cool things that he does as a revenue automation expert. And I wanted you to say it so that it was said correctly. And how you're doing it is what is even more amazing. And so we'll get to that in a minute. But Chuck, what you're doing here in the United States kind of had its genesis somewhere else, but brought over here. But let's learn about you in just a few minutes. But Task4Pros, just give us the quick, elevator pitch of what that is so that we can set the stage before we get into anything else.
Yeah, we're an on-demand workforce solution. All the workers are W-2 employees of Task4Pros, and we provide on-demand work solutions for companies in the supply chain, manufacturing, as well as office environments.
Very good. Thank you. All right, so let's just dig into Marc for just a second. Marc, tell us about Evolved Profits a little bit for those people who haven't seen your interview and don't know about what you're doing. Share a little bit about that and where it came from. Why did you start it?
So we basically help businesses get their pricing right on the products that they procure or the services they procure from different vendors. And it's actually easier today than it's ever been because during the pandemic, raised prices whether they needed to or not, but because they could. We've actually had success. Matter of fact, a great story is one of my clients from 10 years ago that happens to be in the medical space. Actually, they have a new VP of finance who actually interviewed us about 6 weeks ago. We are now one of the two finalists, and he had no idea that we actually helped them 10 years ago. It's kind of crazy because what we do is, I wouldn't say it's unique, but it's different. We're a price disruptor, not a business disruptor, but a price disruptor. Because vendors basically, they take advantage of the fact, well, if I raise my price 2% here, 3% there, 2% here, 3% there, before you know it, in 5 to 7 years, you're paying 100% more than you were paying before. And so we like to look at that. And, bottom line is we're trying to help everybody win, right? Vendors win, keep the business. We don't change the business. It doesn't have to change. Implementing price change is a lot easier than implementing a vendor change. People are used to people as long as they don't, as long as they're not upset with their vendor, stick with what you got. It's a lot easier. So that's what we do. That's how we have fun every day. And, helping our businesses be more successful, put money back in the business so they can grow their business. Maybe they can pay employees more. Maybe they can provide benefits that they weren't able to, provide before. That's how we fund. And then we have one important thing, our 5% impact fund. So every fee that our client pays us, so 5 cents out of every dollar, goes into an impact fund that the client gets to direct where it goes to a nonprofit of their choice. If they don't have one, we'll direct it to one that we support. But last year we donated over $500,000. We expect to do the same thing again this year for our clients.
Fantastic. Mark, what I loved about our interview is you gave a couple of good case studies or examples. And so if you could just give us one quick one so that gives Chuck a mindset of what a picture, I like a paint a picture type situation of what it is you do and how you do it. So give us an example, if you will, of what you've done.
So yeah, here's kind of a crazy one. We get a call from a Boeing subcontractor. And the Boeing subcontractor says they need help with their stress test process. Because I always said there's no category safe from us. I never dealt with that category before, but I said, let me get back to you. I believe we can help you anyhow. So I get off the call with the client and I email a couple of my guys in my system. One of my guys, oh, I got a PhD in that. That's what your PhD is? Not necessarily stress testing airplane parts, but stress test process. As it turns out, it wasn't even that. It was a rubbish and a recycling issue. They would get this real fine sand in 55-gallon drums that were lined in great condition. They would dump it into their device that does the stress testing. When they were done with it, they would put it into a roll-off container. Somebody would come and take it away. The drums, which were in excellent shape, they have the tops and everything. They were put onto a flatbed trailer. Guy would come in, he would take them away, and he would charge them a nominal fee. So I always like to say my BS flag went up because both were not right. Something was wrong with what they were charging. And in between the two of them was about a $750,000 expense. So it wasn't a huge expense, but it was still an expense, for this business. And when we looked at it and I made some phone calls, I found out that both were actually selling the product, the drums, on a secondary market, and the sand for the other vendor to actually the company that rebags sand for Home Depot and Lowe's. So we turned a $750,000 expense into a $750,000 revenue in a matter of just 2 months for the client. So there's one of my one of my fun stories. You never know.
I tell you what, $750,000 is pretty good. I don't think that's anything to blink at.
Yeah, so it's $1.5 million turnaround, right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Yeah. So thank you, Mark.
That's how we have fun.
Wonderful. When Tompkins Ventures told me first about this wonderful Task4Pros, I wasn't really sure how that played out in these other spaces that they were talking to me about. But when you came along and I've seen the demo and all of that, it just made perfect sense and the way that you presented it to us. And I think it was just because of how it was being utilized other places in other countries. It's interesting when you see it in your own backyard or you can visualize how it's being done. Tell us the genesis. Well, first of all, let's tell us about you and how you came into the work that you're doing. And then we can talk about the genesis of Task4Pros.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be with you today. And Mark, I love your story. There are some similarities here, and I'll kind of explain that in a moment. But myself, I've been in supply chain since I got out of school, so it's many, many years. Did warehousing, regional trucking, also did air freight for a period of time, but the majority of my career was in final mile custom logistics. And I've been the president or CEO of some of the larger regional providers in the country. And then probably 4 or 5 years ago, I got more involved in international supply chain, started working with some companies and helping them with their network and delivery capabilities in the US. Through that, I was introduced to a company in Brazil called Mia Chapa in Brazil, and was asked if I would come down, work with them, look at their model, and give them my opinion and what needed to change for it to be able to expand into the US. So Mark, much like what you talked about, solving problems and being innovative is certainly the exciting part of our jobs, and finding and helping companies excel in whatever that may be, kind of the American way, if you will. So I went down to Brazil. I worked with the team down there, and they built proprietary technology that has the app, has dashboards for our clients, gives the full operating system for managing labor. And we're currently now in Portugal, Brazil, and in Brazil they have 100,000 pros working today. Here in the US, we've been up and running now for just about 2 years and seeing some wonderful results. But what we do is when I went to Brazil and worked with the team there, I did a full analysis on the temp staffing agency industry in the US. Through that, obviously, we've seen a lot of opportunities for improvement and re-establishing industry standards. So, for example, the industry as a whole has about a 70% fill rate, meaning if you ask for 10 workers, you might get 7 or 8. So a lot of the companies I talked with said, so we started ordering 13 and hoping we would get 10, and that's problematic also. Or they would show up, not know why they're there, what they would be doing. At the first break, they go out to their vehicle, we never see them again, whatever. And then we looked at the turnover rate for that industry also, which is about 52%, very high. So you got unskilled labor, they weren't vetted well. Of 1099 workers, meaning independent contractors, which in the warehouse environment or manufacturing environment, they do not qualify as 1099 workers. So you had worker misclassification and co-employment issues, along with not getting the quality of person you want. So we took a holistic approach and built the model for the US with scalability, sustainability, profitability, and risk management in mind. So we took the technology that was already developed in Brazil. We had to modify it a little bit for the US, but foundation was already there. Most of the clients that I've spoken with in the US that we're doing work with, almost 100% of them, I would go in and sit down with them and say, if you try to hire your own employees, what kind of success do you have? That's terrible. We can't find anybody with typical type of answer I got. And I said, okay, your staffing companies or temp agencies that you use to support your workforce, how happy are you with them? Got the same kind of story that I got when I did the industry analysis. So with us, there's absolutely no risk in trying us, because we could do a pilot. I've got many companies that we started out with 5 or 10 workers, and I've got companies now that are anywhere from 4x to 7x the number they started with. I've got a client out in Texas that we're in the process. We started out, he needed a second shift, so we fully staffed his second shift. All of our workers are W-2s. We do background checks, drug screens, and we really recruit a specific profile. People, one, with either proven work ethic, meaning I can see that they've worked for another company for X number of years, and it's an individual looking to pick up some extra earnings and wants to work a full shift. Or you'll need to have contact information before I can do that. Would you want? I don't know what that is.
Is that an example of your tech? I love it. I was going to ask you about it.
It sounds like Siri or something picked up or somewhere on something. But anyway, I apologize for that if it's on my end. But at any rate, we staffed his entire second shift, again, fully vetted. And the profile. So a lot of workers today, and when you hear the job reports, obviously you need to do a much deeper dive into that data. But when they say X number of jobs added, that sounds wonderful. But in today's economy, we're finding a lot of people that are picking up secondary jobs to make ends meet. So I can look at some individuals and say, okay, he's got 4 years at this company, great work ethic. needs to pick up extra activity. Obviously that profile works well. And then 2, people who need flexible work schedules for whatever reason, but a specific reason. So in the staffing temp agency model, it's basically a warm body. In our model, if it's somebody looking for schedule flexibility, for example, if it's a college student that goes to class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but wants to work on Tuesday, Thursday, we know that person's responsible because he's looking for that schedule for a specific reason. Others may have family commitments, young children, senior adults, whatever it may be, but it tells you they're responsible. So that's part of our profiling that we look at when we talk with people. And then with our background checks and vetting and them being W-2s, our customers don't pay the workers' compensation, the unemployment, the tax liability. And that customer out in Texas, we did the entire second shift. Now we sit down with him, Mark, probably much like what you do with some of your clients, and talked about his economics. And we are converting about 70% of his employee staff to Task4Pros. Other than C-level and senior management teams, his entire workforce will come over to Task4Pros. It allows that client, one, this client had significant overtime. With our model, you can minimize or eliminate overtime. And with our training and orientation, we were bringing in people better skilled and quality than what he was accustomed to getting. I'm seeing that over and over again with our clients, which is a wonderful trend for us. And it's allowing them to really focus on their core competencies. I have one client that said, Chuck, I didn't realize how much our warehouse was distracting our strategy meetings and our core competencies. Since you guys have taken it over, our strategy meetings are totally different, and we're more focused now on sales, growing the business than we are in dealing with the headaches because the warehouse just was not one of their focus areas in core competencies. So we really provide the clients with that risk management, protecting them from co-employment and worker misclassification. We allow them to scale up and down very quickly because of the flexible schedules. It's sustainable, so they can, focus on core competencies and grow into business because we can manage the growth. If they want to open up a new facility, we typically can open up a new facility in a new market in 2 weeks or less. So they are no longer restricted in their growth because they can't find the labor in that situation. I've also got other clients that are realizing, and I'll just use one example. A gentleman called me and said he tried offshoring for a labor solution, did not have a lot of luck with it. But he said, Chuck, I've known you for a long time. What if the people who can work remotely in my office work with you in Tennessee, and it eliminates the labor issues and the complexities within the state that he's in? And you can imagine what those states are. In fact, we talked about one of them earlier today. Companies are starting to look at it now as one, it's very cost effective because in the long run, it's a cheaper option. It's a better quality option. It gives them a lot more flexibility and capability, and it protects them on the risk management side. So we're having tremendous success, and we continue to grow. In fact, I've got a trip Monday and Tuesday of next week. One is a site visit with a new customer that wants us to take over their entire warehouse staff. They're getting ready to go for a round of funding. And they did an analysis and said, if Task4Pros does all of our warehousing staffing, it puts them in a better position for funding with their investors. And then I'll go from there to a customer that we actually started a week and a half ago, and they have already expanded the number of pros that we are providing for them by about 7x. So growing very rapidly with them also.
Well, very good. Yeah, and I know that other than just the industries that you mentioned, really, it's almost the sky's the limit, because you've been getting calls like Mark gets of these oddball, strange, things that people ask. Like you said, airport. I think that you said one time on a call that you got calls from airport for something. I wanted to give Mark a chance to ask a question if you have one at this point.
So I love your model. Because you're adding both efficiency, quality, and pricing that's attractive to businesses. So we definitely need to understand some more. But I guess you're what they would call a PEO, or professional employment organization, but with a very unique approach, because you're certainly not typical. As you can imagine, we've seen them all, or almost all of them. It's pretty unique, because the amount of due diligence you're putting into the people that you're hiring, as you've already mentioned, is far superior to than what you get if you call, and I won't name any names, but one of the temp agencies. And every one of the issues that you brought up, I think I've heard that once or twice before, if not more. So yeah, it's very, very unique, and the model is great. And it's definitely different. And it's app-based. You can run this off.
Ask him to share a little bit about the tech behind it.
Other than dashboard, obviously, because everybody, you have that too. But if I need somebody and I'm in the middle of my warehouse, and I can boom, hit you up, and somebody be there at some point, whatever we decide the response time is.
Yeah, so it is app-based, although customers, can call us and tell us what they need. They can enter it on their desktop or laptop, or they could use mobile device. And all of our pros also are on their mobile device, so they can pick schedules, they can see all their earnings, they can pull up their, any of the records at all, updated their information. And we also do a 2-hour pre-notification, and the app manages this for us. So the 2-hour pre-notification, if a guy schedule starts at midnight, then the app alerts them, and they have to confirm that at 10 p.m. that they'll be there for the midnight shift. We've found that, obviously midnight shifts, somebody could oversleep, whatever the case may be. But that 2-hour pre-notification, if we don't receive it, then the system alerts our people, and we reach out to the individual. If we still do not make contact, then we backfill the position with another pro. So from an industry standard, that 70% fill rate, we're running depending on the week, anywhere from 97.5% to 99.2% on our fill rate across the network.
I love the fact that you call them pros. That's not an industry standard name for someone, especially in the temp space.
Well, there's an interesting story behind that. So when I was in Brazil, and the original company called me a Chapa, it is converting all to Task4Pros, and will be a US-based corporate company based here instead of in Brazil, although Brazil obviously will still have significant operations. I said, well, one of the things is Mia Chapa, and this may not sound professional, but I said, we need to consider a different name. In the US, that's if I told somebody Mia Chapa, they would think it was connected to a drug cartel or something. So the question was, well, what would you suggest? And I said, well, we refer to the shifts or the schedules as tasks. I said, I would incorporate something that says we're professional and our individuals have been vetted and they're professionals, us Task4Pros. And it really is giving economic improvement both to the individuals as well as our clients. We have also, in discussion with some economic development groups in several different states. I mean, Mary, you mentioned earlier some of the other opportunities people were asking me about. We're in conversation about disaster recovery. With us having pros in multiple geographic areas, if a certain area gets hit and be it a government agency or whatever needs support, can we pull them from other markets? And certainly we can do that, and we will. And then, airport operations, you name it, it's being discussed at this point. Companies are calling me and saying, can you do this, X, Y, or Z? And there's no reason you can't, because the workforce of today is really looking for that work-life balance, wanting that flexibility. We do have a conversion part of our model where if somebody works with a client and the client wants to convert them to an employee for them, certainly we can do that. But early on in the US, one of the first pilots we did, the company wanted to recruit 3 of our pros, went to them and talked to them, and they said, now I'm happy where I'm at, I'll stay here working, but I want to work for Task4Pros. They didn't want, and I had conversations with them because they were offering benefits, etc., which obviously we do too, but it's a different model. But when I talked to them, they said they viewed that company as Big Brother, corporate America, and if they wanted to take off, it was viewed as a negative and frowned upon. Where in our model, they had that flexibility and that freedom to take off for whatever personal reasons they felt was appropriate.
Yeah, I can see that being a plus for sure.
I mean, your model is exactly what is the world turning to today.
Yes.
Full flexibility. Let me work how I want to work, not how, as you already mentioned, somebody else is compelling me to work because this is their model. No. I like the individuality of the ability to do what I want, when I want, how I want, where I want. And that's especially if the compensation and the benefits are similar. Why would I? Even if it's a little bit more, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so our standard pricing model is an hourly based model. That's why most companies are familiar with it and they want to go that route. But we also will do a per piece pricing model. We do a pay for performance tiered model. I've got a client right now that we're in the process. We are actually taking in an industrial engineer and looking at their warehouse layout and workflows to gain efficiencies. Obviously, that helps us, it helps them, everybody wins. So yeah, we're offering a lot more than what your typical staffing company would provide for most companies.
Wow. So Chuck, you're kind of getting a first look at a company that is telling you right off the bat that they have some issues that they want to get corrected. And while they may think that most of their issues have to do with staffing, and maybe that is true, it could be that there's more going on there than just that. And I don't know if you find that to be true, Mark, when you get into something, people, it's just like you said, you got into the thing that the stress testing thing, then you thought it was one thing and you got into it and it was a whole different animal. I think you guys probably run into that when you go to the actual operations and see it. Mark, when you when you're working in your space and your realm, you're all over the United States, correct? I mean, you can work virtually. And of course you can too. Task4Pros, you just need to be able to open wherever, if you don't already have an operation, you just need to be able to open. Right now, how many states are you in, Chuck?
I believe it's 9 at the moment.
Okay.
9 different states.
And when did you start in the US?
Q4 of 22.
Okay. Hasn't been that terribly long, but that's good that you're doing really well.
Actually, our first pilot was right during Q4, right at during peak for e-com, and layered on top. Yeah,
Lovely.
we came out, really went to market in 23.
Good.
Perfect.
I was just wondering, Mark, if you had questions about the types of clients that he has, or the corporations, or the types of spaces, anything like that might resonate with what you're doing.
Well, I mean, manufacturing, obviously, we help manufacturing quite a bit. Another interesting area is in the nursing home, retirement home space. One of our latest clients has 30 different locations in 10 different states. They have a staffing issue.
All of them do. I serve on the Governor's Aging Council here in North Carolina. That's a huge issue for us.
Yeah, we're getting knee deep into that business. And for us, I mean, really, I'm looking right now at a mold manufacturer. Mold meaning like physical molds, not mold the problematic molds. And they're in 6 different states as well, and they've got issues. So it's that align really pretty close to what your model is, for sure, Chuck. So yeah, there's definitely overlap in what you're doing, what we do. But yeah, efficiencies. I mean, you find savings and efficiencies because if you make a business more efficient, they're going to save money whether they want to or not, because you're getting rid of issues that no longer are issues, right? Mistakes that are no longer mistakes. So yeah, it's there's definitely an overlap in obviously what we do and what you do for certain.
Mark, when you told me one time, I think it was telephones. I think you said when people turn over as staff and that you found out that were they not turning in phones, or maybe they did turn in their cell phones, and tell us about that.
Yeah, the mobile phones are an amazing story, because it's crazy how, and this happens a lot when you have large sales organizations, right? So a new sales guy comes in, and what do? You get him a phone, right? But the old guy that left like a month earlier, what happened to his phone? Well, you turned it off and you put it gave it to the IT department, and it went into a file box. Yeah, but wait a minute, that phone was only like maybe 6 months old. There's nothing wrong with that phone. Why wouldn't you just turn it back on? Give it to the new guy. No. He gets a new phone. It's crazy how that stuff happens. And then they never turn the line off. So you have all these lines that businesses are paying for that are not even being used. Or it's the old when we used to look at regular landline businesses, and of course phones today are a lot different than they were, but how many of those ring no answer lines, that especially in law firms, so many phone numbers that they have that they pay for on a monthly basis will ring no answer. Why? Because they just never bothered to turn them off.
Well, Mark, I'm sure you remember the invoices that Nextel and AT&T would send out on your business phones. I mean, it'd be the size of a phone book. So many companies trying to figure out if they were being billed properly. It was just a nightmare.
Right. Absolutely impossible. So we help them with those things.
I could see IT departments tossing them in a box, because in government, that's a lot what happens is, the old stuff just goes in a box and they don't give it a second thought. And the department just gets a new bunch of computers or laptops or, tablets or whatever, and gets all hooked up, and they probably don't even think about it because they're not the ones, the IT department's not the ones that look at the bill. And the people that do pay the bill don't know where the equipment is, don't know what's being used or what's not being used.
Yeah, so that's like one of the issues with this business, this new client, is they have no inventory management system. I mean, what do you mean
something.
you have no, what do you mean you have no inventory management system? You don't know where this equipment is or how long it's been there or whatever. I mean, you got Mr. Smith, who is unfortunately had, is they say in the insurance business, an adverse mortality experience. He's no longer on this earth.
He
But they're
died.
still paying, they're paying for all the equipment that's in his room because they haven't bothered to clear it out because it's nobody's responsibility. It doesn't show up as excess inventory. It's like, wait a minute, the guy's been gone for like 3 months and you've been paying 3 months on this equipment. It's not like it's a little bit of money either, because most places don't buy equipment, they rent it from a provider. Whatever. I could
Wow.
get on my phone box, but yeah.
The whole equipment issue is certainly interesting, Mark, to, obviously from the perspective that you shared, but, if you go into a lot of the warehouses, be it scanners or conveyor equipment or whatever it may be, yeah, it's not necessarily being used efficiently. Maybe it is over there in the box or whatever the case may be. And a lot of the companies don't look at it and say, wow, if I brought in 5 new scanners, it would save me X number of hours a week in processing time. And, they're so busy in dealing with getting the freight in and out that a lot of times they don't look at maybe the low-hanging fruit of the obvious on how they can improve some of those efficiencies. And we've been successful in helping some companies do that.
Yeah. And oh, by the
Nice.
way, the barcode scanner is now 50 years old this week, right?
My gosh.
Yeah, and it never changed. However, now there's a new 2D code that's coming out apparently. That's better than you can hold more data than a QR code.
Yeah.
So an RFID chip. So yeah, so Chuck, you got some more stuff coming to your it's going to change.
New training. New
Yeah,
training
well,
happening.
it's like anything else, right? Scan it the same way, but you got to have the software in the scanner to be able to interpret it, right?
Hopefully they'll figure out a smooth way to convert to the new format, because when scanners first came out, everybody wanted their own system, and you couldn't have, a driver carrying 4 or 5 different types of scanners with him. Hopefully some lessons learned from previous mistakes. Yeah, overall, from a risk management standpoint, scalability, sustainability, profitability, and quality, that's what we're all about. And our goal is really to reset that standard for the industry. Depending who you talk with, they may think of us as a, staffing company or whatever, but a lot of people also look at us as a technology company that just happens to be providing labor solutions.
Right. Well, look at Tesla, right? They're a technology company that provides vehicles.
No.
Yeah, so I would suspect that if you had a client that you're not in a state that they're in, it's pretty easy for you to onboard somebody in a new state.
Yeah, I mean, I can open up. We have opened up every single market in 2 weeks or less once the agreement's done, and the agreements are pretty simple. Yeah, once we start recruiting to turning the switch on, 2 weeks max is what it's taken us. I had one client, and Mary, I think, has heard the story, that I met with on a Tuesday, and they said, Chuck, this was last summer, we're going to need to add second shift. They only ran 2 shifts, but they needed to run another one. Once peak volume hits, I asked him, I said, no problem. When do you expect that to be? And he said, oh, it's probably going to be 3 to 5 weeks. Great. We'll be ready. That was on a Tuesday. On Thursday at about 4:30, he called me and said, Chuck, I apologize, but volumes hit much faster than we anticipated, and I need to get second shift up and running as quickly as possible. So from 4:30 on Thursday till Monday, we started an entire full second shift, fully staffed, trained, using their technology and equipment. And he said, I have no idea how you did that. He was amazed. Obviously, we were pleased, and it worked out very well. But from Thursday afternoon to Monday's second shift, we did the whole, staffing, training, everything.
Wow, amazing. It's pretty remarkable.
And didn't sleep.
It was an easier lift than you would anticipate, fortunately. So it worked well.
Very good. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap this up by asking you one last question. Where are you headed, Chuck? What's the next new thing? Are you planning on opening in another state, or is there something else you're adding on to the mix of things?
Well, probably I've got several startups planned over the next 45 days. And I'll wait until post the July 4th break. But I want to get some communication out to companies that are preparing and planning for peak 2024. If they know they're going to need staffing and additional labor, get on the list now, because what I will not do is overextend our resources and capabilities. Second half of July, I'll start reaching out to companies and telling them, let me know what you think you might need. And, at some point in time, I'll make sure that we don't overextend ourselves and shut off the process.
Yeah. Final words, final questions, Marc?
No, I think what you're doing is unique. It's needed, and obviously because you're able to find pros quite rapidly to be able to solve a client's need within a moment's notice. So I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and thank you. And yeah, to the point about peak, and I'm not wanting to overextend myself, I've got one customer that I'm talking with that in one facility outside of Atlanta, for peak, they bring in 1,000 workers for that 3.5-month period. That tells
you you need to know
the impact that Q4 and peak season, although e-com and peak last year kind of flattened out a little bit. I kind of anticipate that to be more to the trend also, but still companies, I would say on scale, most of them that are focused on e-com have to double their staff during peak season. So
interesting.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I sure appreciate you taking the time here to be with me. And I'm so glad I got you guys together. I think this is good. So I could see maybe some referrals going back and forth. And I got to learn more about both of you and what you're doing. And so always a pleasure. And I have taken notes, and I've got sort of names rolling around in my head too. So I'll be back at you. So thank you, guys. And I appreciate all that you're doing. And I appreciate everybody watching.
Have a good evening.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye-bye.